Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
I just took a walk in my shorts and a t-shirt today. Springtime is here. It's great.
It is. We are heading into spring. It is beautiful weather here in the Northeast and hopefully around the country. And when it gets to this time of year, I notice that a lot of folks start wanting to play hooky. They want to spend more time outside, they want to enjoy the weather, but of course, we've all got work to do. So, what we're going to be talking about today is holding yourself accountable and why accountability is necessary, not just for productivity, but also for leadership. And I will tell you right off the bat, one of the best books I have ever read about accountability is called Extreme Ownership, and it's by Jocko Willink. Not sure I'm pronouncing his last name right. But Jocko was a former Navy SEAL, and the whole book is formatted where he and his co author are talking about missions that the SEALs went on, the lessons and accountability that they learned on these missions, and then how to apply those lessons to business. And both of them are now consultants. The book is absolutely fantastic, and it is completely motivating, but it makes some very good points. And the base that we need to take away from it is that you have to be accountable for everything you do. If somebody else doesn't do something that you expected them to do, you have to look at it as, well, was I clear enough about what I needed done? Did I make the necessity of this clear? It's not about blaming other people. It's what can I do next time to make sure this doesn't happen again? And accountability has a lot of different benefits. Yes, there's increased productivity, but you'll also see increased respect because when people see you are taking responsibility for what happens, whether or not somebody else can share in that responsibility is irrelevant. The fact that you are stepping up and saying, I did not make the needs clear. I was not specific enough about what needed to be done. Or I didn't take XYZ into account. When you take responsibility, people respect that.
Yeah, and obviously we're exposed 100% just about to the exact opposite of that. And that's when things go wrong. We are hearing the media and the people and so on and so forth out there blame people, point fingers at each other, and so on and so forth without looking for a solution. I mean, everybody's really, really great at pointing out what is wrong. But if you can start with a proactive attitude and a plan and say, I'm going to make this work, obviously it will help out as far as solving the problem. But think about your own self-esteem. Think about how other people respect you, as you say. If you are just practicing this as a habit, and you can develop this as a habit and just say by a mantra, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to be accountable, because the only person that can be accountable is that person in the mirror. If you blame somebody and so on and so forth, when's the last time you blamed somebody and they came back and said, oh yeah, it's my fault, when it truly wasn't their fault? It just doesn't work that way. So if you lead with kindness and lead with responsibility and lead with accountability, it's going to help out you. It's going to help out your workplace. It's going to help out everything around you in your life. and people will gravitate to you and just want a piece of what you're doing because you'll actually be influencing them to practice the same thing just by being you.
Exactly. And it also facilitates teamwork because when you go to someone and say, it didn't work and it's your fault, immediately their back gets up. They're pre programmed to resist that idea. So all you've done is start an argument. But when you go to them and say, this wasn't done right because I did not make it clear to you what needed to be done, that removes that barrier. That actually allows them to say, well, maybe I didn't understand, but I also didn't ask questions. So they can accept some responsibility. But when you're foisting responsibility on somebody, people's first instinct is to push back. When you take responsibility, it encourages others to take responsibility for their actions. So there's a lot to accountability. And again, it's not just, well, it's my fault. You have to be specific. What was it that you did that led to something happening, good or bad? And accountability works both ways. It's not just about taking responsibility when things go wrong, it's about taking the small wins when things go right. And when you share that responsibility when things go right and accept it when things go wrong, it encourages others to do the same. So, in the book Extreme Ownership, there was an operation that went wrong. And in the debrief, Jocko was the commander, and he goes in and says, all right, so who is responsible? And a number of the SEAL team members all say, well, I should have done this, so I'm responsible. And each time, Jocko tells them, no, you're not responsible. And finally, after several people accept responsibility, he says, no, there's only one person responsible, and that's me. I'm in command. I am responsible for everything that happens. Now, at the time, his superior officers were in this debrief, and he expected by taking responsibility, he was going to be disciplined. He wasn't, because they respected the fact that he took responsibility and that he took actions to say, this won't happen again because we know what happened and now we can fix it. So accountability isn't simply about blame. It's about making sure whatever happened that shouldn't have happened doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I do my research on these things. Accountability is well defined and so on and so forth as far as what it is. But I found it says use these 6 steps to become more personally accountable. And number one, which you mentioned, which is most important, is know your role. You need to understand your responsibilities to be accountable for them. Number two, this gets to personal. Be honest and set your side of pride. Set your pride aside. I'm getting tongue-tied here a little bit. And number three, be willing to say you're sorry. If something has gone wrong and you're responsible, then apologize, just like the example that you just used. And then number four is use your time wisely. And obviously, we've talked about time management and planning and so on. But if you're focused on getting the job done the right way and use your time wisely, that's really, really important. Next is don't overcommit. If you're just a yes person and all of a sudden your to-do list is 25 pages long for 3 days, you're bound to let something slip through and it's just not going to work out that well. So basically, if you want to be accountable, you can't be accountable for more than what your capacity is. So don't overcommit. And then if things do go wrong, and if things go right, reflect on the whys and congratulate yourself for what worked out and learn from what went wrong, and then move ahead. So these are just 6 steps. And obviously, you can go online and Google accountability and come up with all types of different little ways to do that. And I'm going to share a few others that are entertaining, but also right to the point later as we're talking through this. So, but it's really, really important, starting with knowing your role and setting your pride aside, and then just working with the team and moving forward.
Yes. Knowing your role is very important. And being a leader does not mean telling everybody what to do. And it doesn't mean micromanaging every aspect of a project. In fact, it has been shown that the best leaders can only really effectively manage 4 people at a time. And this is where hierarchies come in. Over the past 20, maybe even 25 years, people have talked about organizational charts and, oh, we need to flatten the organizational chart and give people more responsibility. And that hasn't really worked out well. And the reason is that leaders can only really manage 4 people. So every person should have 4 people that are reporting to them, and you should be able to delegate leadership of different tasks to each of those people, because each of those people can then manage 4 people. And that's where the hierarchy works, because you're delegating responsibility, but you are also accepting responsibility. You have to know whatever these 4 people do, you are responsible for. And anything that they delegate to their direct reports, you are still responsible for. You have to have that big picture. And communications is critical, because nothing is going to get done properly if you are not communicating. Every member of your team, whether it's a division, a sports team, a department, or a whole company, every member of that team needs to know the goals. What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish it? And you have to communicate this clearly, because inevitably things are going to change. There is an old military adage that says, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And what this means is that when the troops hit the ground, they have to know exactly what the objective is, because they may have to change their strategies and change their tactics on the fly based on conditions on the ground. Now, that same saying was very creatively paraphrased by Mike Tyson, who says, everybody has a plan until I punch them in the face. And it's true. No matter what your plan is, no matter how well thought out it is, nobody can take everything into account. So you have to be very clear about what it is that's being accomplished and why it's being accomplished. And you have to boil it down simply. But people have to know the whole picture, not just their job. And the reason for this is because they have to understand why decisions are being made. When they understand why the decisions are being made, they can believe in the mission, believe in the direction, and understand when things need to be changed and take responsibility for doing so. So again, you're encouraging accountability in others, but you're taking accountability by making sure the people on the ground and the people you're working with are very clear about all of the objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking up some letters, here's the entertaining part. The 3 Ds of avoiding accountability. These are businesses and situations that are probably not doing too well, but it's human nature to do these things when things aren't going too well. The 3 Ds of avoiding accountability: deny, deflect, and diffuse. And basically, what that is just taking the blame and shuffling off to somebody else. The opposite of that, the 5 C's of accountability, and this is especially in the workplace or if you're working on projects, nonprofits and so on and so forth. The 5 C's, number one is common purpose, which is the why. Why are you doing this? Number two is the clear expectations, the who's and the what's. You talked about the organization chart, and I'll throw into that too, which is not part of this, but if you want to make an organization chart work, have that just be tasks rather than people doing things. And for those tasks, create a checklist as to how each one of those tasks are done that you can use, number one, to teach people, and number two, to hold them accountable. Really, really important to do that. So clear expectations are who and what. Number three, communication and alignment. And that's how do we set this up for success? And basically, if you have a team-oriented approach where everybody's working together as opposed from a top-down approach, that's so, so important. Number four is coaching and collaboration. And what that is just going through things, making adjustments as needed, but from a coaching standpoint, instead of a do this, do that. And then the consequences, basically, they're going to be positive or negative. And basically, what you need to do is learn from that and act moving ahead. So, common purpose, clear expectations, communication and alignment, coaching and collaboration, and consequences, guided by a solid organization chart as far as what needs to be done with an operations checklist as to how to do it for accountability's sake and for teaching's sake. That will help out a lot.
Yes, it will. And those are great C's, and we really do need to focus on those. I've mentioned communications, but you were talking about clear expectations, and communications was after that. And those two are very closely tied in, because if you're not communicating clearly, the expectations won't be clear, the objectives won't be clear. So you need to be able to understand yourself what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. And you also have to remember this happens very often certainly in companies, but also in the military, in small teams. People make assumptions, and those assumptions are not necessarily correct. And the first assumption that you need to make, that most people don't make, is that everybody who is involved in the project has a vested interest in seeing that project succeed. Now, when you make that assumption, it changes your mindset. Because we've all heard people complain, especially in larger corporations, complaining about the people in other departments not doing what you need them to get done, or asking too many questions that, we've already answered these, they should know this by now. But when you make the assumption that everything they are doing is trying to move the project forward, you then have to ask yourself, if they're still asking questions, or if what they're doing isn't working for you, did you make the objectives clear? Did you make what you need from them clear? And again, you're taking responsibility. Nobody wants to see a project that they are working on fail. But when people don't have all the information, they make assumptions. When those assumptions aren't correct, it causes conflict. So you have to avoid the assumptions, with the one exception to assume you're all working together. And when something's not working, say, hey, this is not going the way we thought it was going to go. Did I make our needs clear? Did I misunderstand what you guys need from us? And again, take responsibility, because it is much easier to move forward when you are saying, well, what do you need from me? How can I make this easier on you? Rather than, you're not doing what we need. You need to get this taken care of. Again, that's just causing conflict. Avoiding the conflict is taking responsibility.
Yeah, another book that we discussed several times that is a really good Bible, as far as I'm concerned, as far as how to treat people, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what we're talking about with these clear expectations, if you can make that your expectations clear to the people that you're working with, what you have developed as a team. And once you have team and you have teamwork, you have the new math, because two heads together, the new math is 1 + 1 is 3, 2 + 2 is 6, and so on and so forth. If you look at sports, football, and so on and so forth, you look at, we're living in Connecticut, go Huskies. They just won the national championship. They had a few good players, but they had more good players and a great strategy for defense, for working together, moving the ball, and so on and so forth. And it's something that can be taught to other people to do the same, which is why our coach Hurley is now one of the most coveted coaches in the country, because he taught the team how to do things and they bought into the mission and the goal. And that's really what it's all about. If you have clear expectations, for him, is now we want 3 championships in a row. Clear expectations, pretty simple. If you're an all-star in the transfer portal looking for another school and you're a superstar and you're going to walk in and individually, I'm going to win UConn another championship, Coach Hurley's going to say, go someplace else. If you want to come and be a team player and leave your ego at the door and work with everybody, and if you look at the interviews, go to YouTube channel and just look at all the interviews of all the players on the team, and you're going to see they're all talking about the same thing. That's a really, really golden example that we're lucky enough to be in Connecticut to really see. But if you can be upfront with your clear expectations and get the team working together, you got a whole lot of that solved. And How to Win Friends and Influence People is just a great way to work the system. And it's basically helping people make the idea theirs just by asking questions as opposed to criticizing. It's so, so important to do that. But if you just go by the golden rule and ask yourself, how would I feel if somebody did this to me? And practice not doing what you don't want done to yourself, taking that the opposite, it's going to work. And that's what it's all about. Teamwork, and teamwork comes from clear expectations and then just working with everybody really, really closely and giving them credit for what's being done, building them up as far as the talents and so on and so forth that they have. And even if they don't, that's what it's all about. Think about this world encouraging each other to make those things happen, as opposed to using the other word, criticizing. It just doesn't work that way. But unfortunately, mankind was born with a brain trying to figure things out. And when things don't go right, we've all been taught since we started walking the earth to figure out why. And normally we deflect, which again is one of the D's.
That's so true. And you hit on one phrase that is so important, and that is check your ego. Being accountable requires checking your ego and operating with a high degree of humility. You have to be confident, but not cocky. You don't want to be complacent, and you don't ever want to forget that your competition is capable and eager to exploit your weaknesses. So you want to put that ego aside. You want to share the celebration with the people that worked with you. You are not doing everything alone. So you need to accept that you can make mistakes. You can require other people to help, and check your ego at the door. The other really big advantage of checking your ego is that you're avoiding more conflict. When you come on as an egotistical maniac, it immediately puts people off. And these are folks that you need to work with. You need to be able to give and take with them. And coming in with the big ego is going to spoil that. So you need to check your ego at the door. That is so important. And it doesn't matter if you're in business, if you're on a sports team, if you're in the military, whatever your situation is, you need to check your ego.
Absolutely. That's so important. And ego really, I mean, another word for that is edging God out, which is the purpose, the good that we came from. And all it is it's based upon your insecurities. If you got to keep flaunting yourself and asking for praise and so on and so forth, obviously we all like that when it's given to us. But if it's given to us unsolicited because of what we're doing and we're helping other people out and somebody else has benefited, it means a whole lot more to you than the best award that you might receive on paper or this or that. It's so important. And that's really what it's all about. If you check your ego at the door, all of a sudden you have a dynamic team with a huge ego, but it's in the right place. And that's really to do good for whatever purpose you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And, we touched upon this earlier, but another very important part of accountability is planning. Leaders have to identify the clear directives for the team. And that includes what's the desired conclusion for the project? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What's the deeper purpose and the strategic vision of the goal? That needs to be explained. There should not be anything on a need to know basis. You should be telling all of this to every member of your team so that they can internalize it, they can believe in the operation, and they can take accountability for their part of it. You need to explore different courses of action about how to accomplish the goal. Figure out the best way and figure out alternatives. You must be able to delegate planning as far down the chain as possible so that everybody is taking ownership of part of the project. That's also important. It's not just about you taking ownership of it, it's not just you, it's all about the team. And then you've got to delegate to make sure that others are taking ownership and being accountable for their parts. And then make the plans as detailed as possible, but they need to be simple to follow. If they are too complicated, they are not going to be followed properly. So when you make a simple, straightforward, but detailed plan, that needs to be shared with everyone on the team. They all need to know where you are, where you're going, and what you're accomplishing. And then you need to plan for contingencies and figure out what the key risks are. And by doing all of this planning and sharing the planning with the team, you should not be making all of these decisions on your own. Find the members of the team with specific strengths and let them plan those parts of it. And that's all about being accountable. It's you are taking responsibility, you are allowing your team to take responsibility, and you are all working together for a common goal that you all believe in the outcome. And that's as simple as a definition as I can come up with for what accountability is and why you need to do it. Now, I see by the old clock on the wall that we are just about out of time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for this week?
Well, getting back to the first three C's. Number one, and this is in life too for yourself too. Common purpose and what your why is. Number two is the clear expectations, the who's and the what's. And we talked a bit about having an organization chart for what the tasks are and them defined in the forms of checklists so you can teach them and hold people accountable for them. And then very, very important is communication and alignment. Now, if those aren't going on and there's no clear expectations and communication alignment, if you're working someplace, ask very, very gently, but go in and just out of concern, just ask, what are we trying to accomplish here? And see, take a little bit of a role there to see if you can get people together more as a team that way. If you're in a position where you know you have a good team working there, but somehow things aren't going right, it probably is coming down to a lack of clear expectations that are being portrayed and communication and alignment. So do your part to see if you can get that out of people just by asking questions so that things can be defined. Because sometimes the most brilliant minds are the greatest communicators. So if you can help out with that, do it.
That's so true. Communication is absolutely key. And again, you need to take responsibility. So if somebody doesn't explain something to you, it's not their fault that they didn't explain it. It's your responsibility to ask questions. You need to make sure you have everything you need to move forward. And not having everything you need is not on somebody else, it's on you. That's the core of accountability. And, we've talked in the past about accountability partners. This is great, but you need to be able to hold yourself accountable, not just rely on someone else. And remember, accountability isn't about discipline and it's not about blame. It's about ownership and doing what's necessary to solve the problem and complete the project. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode of Success Showcase as well as the rest of the Xvadio Podcast Network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.